Coming up on LevinTV, the silent coup escalates, and it all starts now.
This is where freedom reigns.
If you believe in America, if you believe in the Constitution empowers us. It's a new day. America's back. America's back, and America's going to get strong again. We're going to defend America, and we're going to defend our interests.
Liberty's voice, LevinTV.
Hello, America. I'm Mark Levin. This is LevinTV on CRTV, Conservative Review TV. Well, you can see all hell's breaking loose. The mainstream media pretty much is trying to keep a lid on it, as are the Democrats. But the fact of the matter is we have a huge problem with the top levels of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And I say that with great trepidation, and I'll tell you why. I was Chief of Staff to an Attorney General. I knew at least 2 former directors of the FBI. We worked incredibly well with the FBI over at the Justice Department. It would never even have occurred to us to interfere with their activities for or against. It never would have occurred to us to interfere with an election. And you know what, ladies and gentlemen? All this talk about Russia interfering with our election, which Russia sought to do, and not just our election, but elections all over the world, but they failed. The FBI also sought to interfere with our election. Mr. Comey did, Mr. McCabe did, the director, former, the current deputy, who will be out soon, as did their underlings, Mr. Stroke, Ms. Page, Raddick, Baker, and others whose names will go down in history infamously. We also know that Loretta Lynch did the same thing. And I want to emphasize something to you. There's no way in hell Barack Obama didn't know some of this. There's no way in hell Barack Obama didn't know that his Department of Justice and FBI had filed applications with the FISA court, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, for counterintelligence investigation. There's no way he wasn't informed about that, either directly from the FBI, the Attorney General, or in his daily presidential briefing, his intelligence briefing. There is no way that they wouldn't have told him because of the potential that it could affect the election. We have an FBI that used a dossier, in my opinion, paid for by the Hillary Clinton campaign and the DNC through this Fusion GPS operation, this seedy operation. They go overseas. They use a former British spy who uses his contacts with the Kremlin to concoct this 35-page character assassination sheet. And what do they do with it? They work it into the FBI. Who brings it to the FBI? Well, Mr. Steele does, as does John McCain's people. What does the FBI do? They bite down hard on this hook. They were thinking about paying Mr. Steele, maybe even bringing him on staff for more information. And apparently they take that information and they run it to a federal court, a secret federal court, which didn't do its job, by the way. The judge or judges on this court who made this decision to issue this warrant against one or more members of Trump world did not do their job. And it's interesting to me that later, I believe it's sometime in April, a judge admonished the Justice Department and the FBI, but we still don't have all the particulars of what took place. We still don't have all the particulars, but it's getting very ugly. The texts, 50,000 texts, however many texts, an enormous number of texts missing over a 5-month period, including up to the day, give or take a day, where Robert Mueller was appointed special counsel. That just so happens? They think we just fell off the tuna boat? That's ridiculous. And what about these texts? A secret society of FBI agents? What's that all about? We need an insurance policy in case Trump wins? What's that all about? This is outrageous. I don't know that this has ever happened in American history or the history of the FBI. You know, the reason why an FBI director gets a 10-year term as FBI director is to ensure that he or she is not political or not influenced by politics. It's not because they're king or queen where they get to make decisions and influence an election. So I just want to make it abundantly clear. We talk about the Russians interfering with our election. Fair enough. They talk about collusion. There was no collusion with Trump and the Russians. But the FBI sought to interfere in our election. I'm not talking about the men and women who work at the FBI. I'm talking about the top echelon. They sought to interfere with our election, and they sought to interfere in our election in worse ways than the Russians did. Now, we can despise the Russians as I do. You can despise Putin as I do. I've never been a code pink Republican. What happened to them, by the way? Where are they? But when it happens in our own tent, in our own country, in our own Justice Department, through the FBI, that's another story. That takes it to a level way up here. And notice the Democrat Party runs interference. Notice the Democrat Party is obstructing information. The Democrat Party was furious that texts were released so the American people would know what's going on. Just as they're trying to sit on a memo that the House Intelligence Committee has put together on some of the information that you and I should know that took place at the FBI during the course of the election. And as I said 2 days ago on my radio show and yesterday on my radio show, how is it that Barack Obama is never questioned about this? His name never comes up. Never comes up. Are you telling me that the director of the National Security Council, Susan Rice, didn't know a thing? Are you telling me that the deputy director of the National Security Council, Ben Rhodes, a well-known leaker, he didn't know a thing? Are you telling me Valerie Jarrett didn't know a thing as she sits there controlling every department and every cabinet secretary? Are you telling me that James Comey, who likes to meet with presidents and takes memos, that he didn't meet with the president or write any memos? Loretta Lynch meets with Bill Clinton on the tarmac. Now we know why she met with Bill Clinton on the tarmac. She told him, or winked and nodded to him, that his wife was in the clear. That's exactly what took place. We would not even have known of that meeting if a local camera crew in Phoenix at their airport hadn't seen them. And all the effort to cover it up. Oh, we were talking about our grandchildren. Really? Nobody believes that. The Justice Department, for the longest time, wouldn't release any documents, any information related to the tarmac meeting. Well, if they're talking about their grandchildren, why would you release it all? Now, this is just part of the continuum. This is what's been taking place. But it didn't start today, and it didn't start yesterday. And it's nice to see now that we have committees of Congress who are concerned about this. It's nice to see now that we have radio hosts who are concerned about this. It's nice to see that we now have television hosts who are concerned about this. Where the hell were they in March? Mark, what are you talking about? Where were they in March? When I had information, pulled it together from the public accounts, and began to pull the string and to see that something didn't smell right, something didn't look right. And the media came down on me like a ton of bricks. I'm a tough guy. I can handle it. That's not my point. They wanted to shut it down. So they used ridicule, they used conspiracy theory arguments, they used right-wing stuff, all that stuff. And I had very little support in the conservative media, almost none. They were, oh, has he gone nutty over here? Has he done? No. So we kicked the door open. And now the door's open. And now people are looking. And they should look. And we need to get to the bottom of this. And if we don't get to the bottom of this, we're in a hell of a lot of trouble. Now, this can be interesting. Based on what we know today, on what has taken place today. On March 5th, I was on Fox and Friends. Sunday, I believe it was. Fox and Friends Sunday. Pete Hegseth, who is a terrific host, he actually let me speak. And I took the public information that I could, put my own opinion based on my own experience in the past at the Department of Justice, and went through these different pieces of information and pulled together what I thought was taking place. That is a widespread effort at espionage, at surveillance, against the opposition party's candidate, Trump, against the opposition party's transition president, Trump. And I want to take us back and take a look at this, and then we'll move forward from there, okay? Let's begin. Go ahead.
Joining us now, live from LevinTV studio, is the former Chief of Staff to Attorney General Edwin Meese, a constitutional lawyer and radio talk show host, the great one, Mark Levin, from his hidden bunker. Mark, thank you very much for joining us this morning. On your Thursday evening radio broadcast, you laid out a devastating case about executive overreach of the Obama administration, which many believe metamorphosized itself to tweets that President Trump sent out on Saturday morning accusing potential wiretapping in Trump Tower. We want to give you a case here this morning to lay out what you know about it, the evidence you have for the potential executive overreach of the Obama administration.
Well, pleasure to be here. The evidence is overwhelming. This is not about President Trump's tweeting. This is about the Obama administration's spying. And the question isn't whether it's spied. We know they went to the FISA court twice. The question is, who did
let
they...
me stop you right there. I knew they went to the FISA court twice because there were public reports on this. They weren't all over the place. They weren't heralded. They were really quiet reports about it. Other media sources weren't picking it up. As a matter of fact, when I finished, a guy by the name of Brian Stelter, who works at CNN, unfortunately, has a media show or whatever they call it. After I did my radio show and discussed this, you have no proof. You have no proof at all that they went to the FISA court. Well, of course I have no proof. I don't have subpoena power. I wasn't there. But you use your common sense and you use reasoning and you look at the public record and you try and figure it out. It was clear to me that they went to the FISA court in the summer and failed. And it was clear to me they went to the FISA court in October and succeeded, which is exactly what I said. Go ahead.
Spy on the extent of the spying. That is, the Trump campaign, the Trump transition, Trump surrogates. And I want to walk you through this, the American people. Exhibit 1. Exhibit 1. This is all public. Head Street. 2 separate sources with links to the counterintelligence community have confirmed that the FBI sought and was granted a Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act court. This is spying. In October, giving counterintelligence permission to examine the activity of, quote, U.S. persons in Donald Trump's campaign with ties to Russia.
Now let's stop here. Do you know that after I came under attack after this program and after my radio show, Head Street pulled that story off their site and joined into the crowd attacking me? What a gutless group over there. Unbelievable. Go ahead.
Let me go on. This isn't me. They say the first FISA request, sources say, named Trump, was denied back in June, denied by the court. But the second was drawn more narrowly and was granted in October after evidence was presented of a server possibly related to the Trump campaign and its alleged links to 2 banks. Now, sources suggest that a FISA warrant was granted to look at the full content of emails and other related documents that may concern U.S. persons.
Now, let's stop here. So why would somebody be leaking this? Because, you see, they wanted to hurt the president. They wanted people to know that there was a counterintelligence investigation of Trump world. When I brought it up, they started to deny the veracity of that report because they realized then what I was doing. I said, wait a minute. They were spying on the president or his people. They went to the FISA court and they got a warrant, a counterintelligence warrant that somebody in Trump world is a Russian agent. That's the probable cause level. And so the media quickly genuflect. They realize, uh-oh, the leak was intended to hurt Trump. And now Levin has taken that leak and said, wait a minute, let's reverse course here. What the hell? They went to the FISA court in October, right before the election, and got a warrant to surveil someone or some entity within Trump world? And they realized, uh-oh. Go ahead.
You know, people are hung up with Trump's word wiretapping. Well, how'd they get access to this server information? Does it really matter if it was wiretapping, electronic surveillance, or whatever it was? Exhibit 2, The Guardian, a well-known right-wing British paper. Here it is, quote, The Guardian has learned the FBI applied for a warrant from the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court over the summer in order to monitor 4 members of the Trump team suspected of irregular contacts with Russian officials. Keep in mind, this is during a presidential election. The sitting president, the incumbent party, is now investigating the presidential candidate of the Republican Party and his campaign to some extent.
So we have this sort of outlier website, Head Street, Then we have this left-wing paper from Britain, The Guardian. And I'm looking at these, and they're similar. There's overlap, and The Guardian's getting into more specificity. And so I am convinced that, in fact, it took place. It hadn't made its way into the mainstream newspapers of the United States, but this Guardian, as left-wing as it is, it's a real newspaper. Go ahead.
The FISA court turned down the application asking FBI counterintelligence investigators to narrow its focus. According to one report, the FBI was finally granted a warrant in October.
Stop there. Now, think about this. I'm bringing us up to speed here. Who would have leaked this? We now know there's a number of texts that indicate the head of counterintelligence at the FBI, Mr. Stroke, was a leaker. At least that's the inference from his texts with his girlfriend, Ms. Page. So somebody, maybe it was him, maybe it was her, but somebody in that inner circle leaked it. That's what took place. And I picked it up. Go ahead.
Exhibit 3, McClatchy, another well-known right-wing newspaper. Here they have the agencies. Headline, FBI, 5 other agencies, 5 other Obama administration agencies probe possible covert Kremlin aid to Trump. The FBI...
Stop. Probe possible covert aid to Trump. Where would they get that from, as we're looking back on this now? The dossier, right? That dossier worked itself into the bloodstream of the Obama administration. Where would they get information about possible collusion with Trump and Russia? The only thing they had, as illegitimate as it is, don't get me wrong, but the only thing they had was the dossier. Go ahead.
5 other law enforcement intelligence agencies have collaborated for months in an investigation into Russian attempts to influence the November election, including whether money from Kremlin covertly aided presidential-elect Donald Trump. 2 people familiar with the matter said. The agencies involved...
2 people familiar with the matter said. Who's accused of leaking? Strzok and his girlfriend, Page, both of whom FBI agents working on the case. I don't know if it's them. I'm just pointing it out. Go ahead.
In the inquiry are the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, the Justice Department, the Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, and representatives of the Director of the National Intelligence. Are you telling me Barack Obama didn't know what was going on in 6 agencies?
As you go on, how are you? Okay, keep going.
I'm not done. I need to make the case because the media seems to be confused about their own reporting. New York Times, another well-known liberal outlet, intercepted Russian communications, part of inquiry into Trump associates, January 19. The FBI is leading the investigations, aided by the NSA, the CIA, Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Unit. The investigators have accelerated their efforts in recent weeks, but have found no conclusive evidence of wrongdoing. Listen to this. One official said intelligence reports based on some of the wiretap communications have been provided to the White House. This is the New York Times,
another right-wing outlet.
4.
And by the way, that has never been answered. That's in the New York Times. That information, some of it, was provided to the White House. Some quote-unquote wiretapped information was provided to the White House. Well, to whom? And why would they keep it from the President of the United States? Why would his inner circle, the staff, keep it from the President of the United States? I don't believe they did. Go ahead.
Let's continue. New York Times again. NSA gets more latitude to share intercepted communications. In the final days of the Obama administration, the administration has expanded the power of the NSA to share globally intercepted personal communications with the government's 16 other intelligence agencies before applying privacy protections. Now, why would they do this on the way out the door?
Now, that is the unmasking. So if you can spread the name of somebody, incidental collection of intelligence information, where under Section 702 of the Patriot Act and so forth, you're supposed to, particularly if it's an American citizen caught up in it, it's supposed to be a rather extraordinary and difficult task to unmask the name. But they did unmask at least one name. His name was Michael Flynn, and they leaked it to the media. If you're spreading names around more freely to 15, 16, 10 different agencies and departments, it's more likely to leak, isn't it? So why on the way out the door, I asked, did they expand the circulation of such information to so many more departments and agencies? I mean, what the hell? They've been there for 8 years, so they do it on the way out the door. And we know why they did it. Because they wanted to get as much information about Trump world and Russia, that is the dossier, as they possibly could, out to the media. That's why. Go ahead.
March 1, Exhibit 6. Obama administration rushed to preserve intelligence of Russian election hacking. In the Obama administration's last days, listen to this, some White House officials scrambled to spread information about Russian efforts to undermine the presidential election and about possible contacts between associates of President-elect Trump and Russians across the government. I'm not done. Exhibit 7, New York Times. Flynn is said to have talked to Russians about sanctions Trump took office. Well, where'd they get this information?
Oh, now we know. Now we know. I didn't know then, but now we know. The incidental collection of information while they were surveilling the Russian ambassador. And then they leaked it out. A felony. And whomever did it still hasn't been found or punished. Go ahead.
Mark, you know, the FISA court, they're always monitoring the Russian ambassador, and so how do we know that? Maybe they are, maybe they're not, but there's an awful lot of other activity.
Sure.
Here we have Washington Post, one more, Washington Post, March 2nd. U.S. investigators have examined contacts Attorney General Sessions had with Russian officials during the time he was advising Donald Trump's campaign. The focus of the U.S. counterintelligence investigation has been on communication between Trump campaign officials and Russia. Listen to this. The inquiry involving Sessions is examining his contacts while serving as Trump's foreign policy advisor in the spring and summer of 2016. This has been going on for a year.
Well, Mark,
now,
as you do on your radio program, you lay out a devastating case based on public documents, as you point out, and not right-wing sources, but mainstream left-stream sources. How confident are you that this investigation, which was on Russian, so-called Russian hacking, but now the White House says this morning will be broadened to looking into executive overreach, how confident are you they will find something there?
I don't know, but they already found something. The issue isn't whether the Obama administration spied on the Trump campaign or transition or certain of its surrogates. The issue is the extent of it. They went into court a second time. They were so aggressive. They waited 4 or 5 months. They go back in October, weeks before the general election. They narrow their request. All of a sudden, we have leaks coming out on Flynn. Then we have a horrible meeting that took place between Sessions and so forth. And I'm telling you, as a former chief of staff to an attorney general of the United States, in the Reagan administration, these are police state tactics. Now, what did Barack Obama know? He knew everything I just read to you apart from 1 or 2 articles. You know how I know? It's in the newspapers. It's right there. So Barack Obama not only knew this, but he gets a daily intelligence briefing. And let me tell you something about daily intelligence briefings. If your attorney general and your FBI is going to the FISA court to get a warrant to investigate aspects of an opposition party in the middle of a general election campaign, how much you want to bet the President of the United States knew that?
I don't want to bet you on that.
Read his opinion.
Mark, we were about to hit a hard break. Is there any way you could stick around for 1 more minute, ask you one more question on this?
That's fine.
You got it. All right, more with Mark Levin on Fox & Friends right around the corner.
By the way, I'm not doing this out of self-flattery. That would be kind of weird, wouldn't it? To drag you through this. I haven't seen this since whenever. I with you. We didn't run this before the show for me to examine it again, and I'm now remembering aspects of it. I with you am now recalling what I said way back then in March, almost a year ago. It's almost a year ago. And now applying it, as we will shortly, to what's taking place now. This kind of laid the base, it laid the foundation. Go ahead.
Levin, Mark, I got to tell you, even just in the break, the response has been overwhelming to the case that you laid out, which is devastating. And Abby and I were talking in the break about sort of where it goes from here, right, Abby?
Yeah, that is the question, because you've laid out your case in this last block. You're very passionate about the evidence that you have. And as Pete said, we have so many people writing us in saying, thank you for speaking your voice. They're right behind you on this. My question, though, how does this play out in the media? How are they going to continue to cover this story?
Let me first say, this is the case made by the New York Times, the Washington Post, McClatchy, and the rest of them. I just put it together as a former Justice Department official. And Donald Trump here is being attacked for what he tweeted. Donald Trump is the victim. His campaign is the victim. His transition team is the victim. His surrogates are the victim. These are police state tactics. I am telling you this as a former chief of staff to an attorney general. If this had been done to Barack Obama, all hell would break loose. And it should. And Barack Obama's statement is pathetic.
Mark?
Let me just say this. Where does it go from here? They ought to release both FISA court applications where they sought the warrant. The one in the summer and the one in October. So we know exactly what they were doing. That's number one. Number two, Congress needs to see the daily presidential intelligence briefings over the past year or so. Those are the beginnings of a serious investigation.
And let me stop here. And Congress has fought to get copies of those applications. And apparently, as recently as a few weeks ago, some members have actually seen them now or seen aspects of them. That's what's crucial. And the presidential intelligence daily briefing, that's crucial too. What did the president know and when did he know it? What did the vice president know and when did he know it? There's other ways of gaining information in that respect, but that is the cleanest way. I can 100%, I believe, I'll do it this way, 99.9% am certain that the President of the United States was informed about this. And not just through the presidential briefing, but I'm sure his staff was informed because the Attorney General Lynch was very close to him and Valerie Jarrett, as had Holder been before. Comey was very close to them. Comey liked to meet with the president. Amazingly, though, apparently he didn't take any notes when he met with that president. Anyway, go ahead.
Number three, for the Republicans in Congress, you control the majority. If the Democrats do not want to assist, and they won't, because I'm starting to think Chuck Schumer and the others are participating in all this cover-up activity, then plow ahead without them. But this is important to the country. We cannot have a sitting presidential administration unleashing 6 federal agencies, intelligence and law enforcement. I don't mean the president personally sitting there and saying, you know what, Valerie, let's go get him. Obviously, the Attorney General and the FBI were involved in this. This is how you get a FISA court.
Obviously, the Attorney General and the FBI were involved in this. None of us knew. We had no way of knowing what would later transpire in terms of the provision of information. That is, the texts that have shown us so much, Comey's conduct that has since showed us so much, the missing texts, and so forth and so on. But we were close, given what we had. Go ahead.
Application prepared and submitted.
Do you think former President Obama was involved in this? And if so, how much was he involved?
I'm not Nostradamus here. I just think that we ought to find out. But I will tell you this. He's more involved than he says. I mean, it's his executive branch. It's his Justice Department. Mine's been the IRS. All of a sudden, the IRS is targeting American citizens. I don't know anything about it. We have reporters, including James Rose in the AP, where the Obama administration did more investigations of reporters than any administration in American history. They're quite capable of these things. But it doesn't matter. We want to know what took place, and there ought to be public hearings on this stuff, too. I agree with the Democrats. Let's get to the bottom of this. So join me. Join us. This is the public record. Yeah. It's the newspaper of record, the New York Times. Let's go.
Mark, there's another aspect of this when you mentioned Chuck Schumer a moment ago. He's been trying to block as many Trump nominations as he can.
All right, let's stop there. So that kind of lays out how all of this began, quite frankly. And the media, which was very excited about getting this information, leaks about the FISA court, so forth and so on, and trying to build the case that they were under investigation, Trump and his team, they were under investigation, the FBI doing that, all of a sudden, whoa, 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 uh-oh, let's reverse course. The Obama administration would never investigate an ongoing campaign of an opposition party. They would never investigate a transition team. Where's your evidence? Where's your evidence? You don't have a FISA. You don't know what you're talking. What a right-wing kook. I'll prove it to you. Go.
White House officials say that the president's sources were various conservative outlets, most prominently perhaps radio host Mark Levin, who seemed to take three basic chunks of information and combine them into one conspiracy theory of what he calls a silent coup.
And on the conservative Breitbart website, which Friday highlighted a conspiracy-loving radio talk show host, Mark Levin.
Now, the story is whatever happened to that guy? He doesn't get to report anymore. Go ahead.
That Obama has been trying to undermine Trump at every turn. As you can see from the headline, it was inspired by a Thursday night radio segment by conservative talk show host Mark Levin.
Apparently, this idea came from right-wing radio host and unlicensed gynecologist Mark Levin, who ranted about these wiretaps on his radio show. That show was then written up by Breitbart as Mark Levin to Congress investigate Obama's silent coup versus Trump.
What does the White House gain by the President of the United by Steve Bannon most likely handing the President of the United States a Breitbart article?
And stop. Guy on the left isn't around anymore because he's a serial sexual harasser. Guy on the right, his IQ sinks every single day. Mr. Deliverance, go ahead.
And talking about what a rabid right-wing talk show host has been theorizing.
Start with firebrand conservative radio host Mark Levin. Briefly, for people who don't know, who is he?
He's got quite a following, and he's not just a conservative figure, but often espousing relatively radical positions about the need to reinvent the Constitution and the government, ways in which we think about society.
The notion that Mark Levin is a news outlet, it's not the New York Times, it's not the Washington Post, it's not the Wall Street Journal, it's not the LA Times, it's not a major news network. It's Mark Levin, a guy who, I know what talk radio guys do, on left and right.
Well, I know what we don't do, and that is molest women, which apparently is something that they do in the media quite extensively. Go ahead.
They rile people up with outrageous charges, and nobody keeps count of them. But here's the President of the United States getting his information from these people.
Evidence for suggesting President Obama has committed a crime seems pretty thin.
The detailed speculation from a conspiracy-loving talk show host, Mark Levin.
Okay. I think we can now officially declare that Trump has a worse media diet than the son of Sam Killer. And he got all his news from a talking dog who told him to murder.
All right, there you go. Aren't they funny? So we're talking about something that's really incredibly serious in a republic. If you believe in the rule of law, liberty, you believe in due process, and they don't even have a modicum of interest. They still don't have a modicum of interest. Now, this thing has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, as you know. The FBI is now being scrutinized over these missing text messages, 50,000 of them that just happen to cover a 4 or 5 month period, and they just happen to bleed into the appointment of the special counsel, Mueller. Now, you can't tell me 50,000 text messages just go missing because there's a technological problem. I mean, you really have to be drunk with stupidity to believe that. So here is how CBS This Morning covered it, without Charlie Rose. Go.
Republicans in Congress are asking why hundreds of messages are missing.
Now let's stop right there. Why is it just that Republicans in Congress are asking? Where are the Democrats? Don't they care about civil liberties anymore? Don't they care about a lawfully operating FBI under their senior management there? And we're not talking about hundreds of missing texts. We're talking about tens of thousands of missing texts. But then again, CBS is part of the Praetorian Guard media. Go ahead.
Between FBI officials Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, who exchanged thousands of texts, frequently discussing the Clinton investigation as well as their dislike of Trump. In one from February 2016, Page texted Strzok, then candidate Trump simply cannot be president. In another, Strzok calls Trump an idiot and awful.
No charges are appropriate in this case.
Strzok and Page also discussed Comey's statement exonerating Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server. An earlier draft noted Secretary Clinton emailed with President Obama from her private server. But the sentence was later edited to replace the president with a senior government
now let's
official.
Stop there. So when Obama was asked about this private server and this, scandal that had been developing involving his former Secretary of State, he said, I don't know anything about a private server, private emails. He's a liar, right here. He's a liar. He texted her on that system. And by the way, he used a different name. So he knew she was doing that. Go ahead.
Strzok and Page also discussed using non-work phones to talk about Clinton so it can't be traced. During the Department of Justice's investigation into Strzok, it found texts were missing between December 14, 2016 and May 17, 2017. Those dates span the presidential transition and the day Robert Mueller was appointed. The FBI blames software and technical issues, saying employees with many Samsung 5 mobile devices did not capture texts during that time.
It's very serious to be able to have someone inside.
Last month on Face the Nation, Republican Senator James Lankford said Strzok's comments are also calling into question his role on the Mueller probe.
It's clear this individual within the Mueller team that was also on the Clinton email investigation team had a strong bias against now President Trump.
Yeah, and let's keep something in mind. It wasn't until the Inspector General delved into the texts and so forth that Strzok was removed from the Mueller team. Mueller didn't discover what Strzok had been doing and Page had been doing right under his nose. In fact, it's Mueller who's brought in many left-wing, aggressive Coup prosecutors from all over the country who have bona fides as liberals and Democrat donors to either Hillary or Obama's campaign or both. And his #1 lieutenant, this guy Weissman, who we've talked about before, he even attended the Hillary Clinton victory party. I guess they had that right next to the Mitt Romney victory party. But the fact is he's a huge partisan, and he's been reprimanded in the past for his aggressive tactics. That's who Mueller is. And Mueller also happens to be best buddies with Comey. And Mueller also happens to be the FBI director before Comey. It's a terrible, terrible situation. Now, Senator Ron Johnson's done a heck of a good job, too, in getting access to a number of these texts. And apparently one of the texts talks about a secret society within the FBI. No, we're not conspiracy nuts. That's from the text. And Ron Johnson says it's been independently corroborated. Check this out. Go.
What this is all about is further evidence of corruption, more than bias, but corruption at the highest levels of the FBI. And that secret society, we have an informant that's talking about a group that were holding secret meetings off-site. There's so much smoke here. There's so much suspicion.
Let's stop there. A secret society, secret meetings off-site of the Justice Department.
Correct.
And you have an informant saying that?
Yes.
Is there anything more about that?
No, we have to dig into it. This is not a distraction. Again, this is bias, potentially corruption at the highest levels of the FBI that is now investigating. And now and by the way, Robert Mueller used to run the FBI. He is in no position to do an investigation over this kind of misconduct. So I think at this point in time, we probably should be looking at a special counsel to undertake this investigation, but Congress is going to have to continue to dig.
And the problem is, what Congress digging is, they don't have the effective power to actually get to the bottom of it. They can subpoena information, then they duke it out with the executive branch. They can conduct hearings. Even if they think somebody's committed perjury in front of them, they can refer it to the Justice Department, you know, and so forth, where it could get lost. But the fact of the matter is, if we don't have a special counsel here, why have the special counsel ever? I mean, this is exactly the kind of case, not the Mueller case, where you have to concoct a collusion conspiracy, and then he's off and running, trying to concoct an obstruction conspiracy against Trump, and, you know, having his agents break down somebody's door in the middle of the morning who's not even a flight risk. He and his wife jumping out of bed at the time, apparently, and spending 10 hours in their condominium looking for stuff, and then charging him with things that the FBI had looked at years ago and never thought of charging him with. I mean, it's just so awful that you need a special counsel to investigate this cronyism and corruption at the highest levels of the FBI and perhaps the highest levels of the Department of Justice that took place in the past, Loretta Lynch and so forth. Remember, there was an associate deputy attorney general by the name of Orr. He was a holdover from the Obama administration. And he served on Rod Rosenstein's staff, the current Deputy Attorney General of the United States. And remember, there he is, in one of the most senior positions in the Justice Department. I'm well familiar with the flow chart, the management chart at the Justice Department. And his wife is an employee of Fusion GPS, not just an employee, but a researcher for Fusion GPS. And he is taking steps to meet with people at Fusion GPS. Of course, he can meet with his wife whenever he wants, and to get information into the Justice Department. And you'll also recall that the former Deputy Attorney General under Obama, who was the acting Attorney General while we waited for Sessions to be confirmed, Sally Yates. I know it gets confusing, but you can play the program back as I lay all this out. Sally Yates, remember her? She's a leftist. Remember when she refused to go to court to defend the President of the United States' executive orders on refugees, which was outrageous, and so he then fired her. She got a text message. You remember this? Who'd she get it from? She got it from an individual who would become Mueller's number 2, this Weissman, cheering her on for obstructing the President of the United States and his policy on refugees. Pretty damn incredible. Then we have from Politico. Amid new signs that Special Counsel Robert Mueller is pursuing an obstruction of justice case against President Trump, Republicans in Congress have intensified their own investigation of the Justice Department's and FBI's handling of inquiries into Trump's ties to Russia. Isn't it interesting how they juxtapose these? Maybe it's Robert Mueller who's intensifying his investigation of Trump because the Republicans are reviewing carefully and thoroughly, I hope, the conduct of the FBI. Tuesday brought several dramatic developments in the Russia saga, including the news that Mueller recently interviewed Attorney General Jeff Sessions, the first cabinet official known to be questioned in the investigation. The New York Times also reported that former FBI Director James Comey was interviewed by Mueller last year. Wow, that must have been a love fest. Were they having a keg party? I mean, was the family on the beach together, having a good time when he was interviewing his old buddy, his successor? And notice it's still being leaked, all this stuff being leaked by Mueller's office, the FBI, to the New York Times. But even as Mueller showed apparent momentum. Momentum toward what? You know, they mean towards going after Trump. The job of a prosecutor isn't to show momentum. The job of a prosecutor isn't even to prosecute. The job of a prosecutor is to try and be as objective as possible as a public official to determine if there is a basis, a legal basis, to bring a case, not to bring a case because they can bring a case. It's not about momentum. It's about the truth, trying to ferret out the truth. On Fox News, Representative Bob Goodlatte, chairman of the House Committee, the House Judiciary Committee, that oversees the Justice Department and FBI, alleged an anti-Trump conspiracy by FBI agents whose text messages exchanges have been made public in selective bursts by GOP lawmakers. This is Politico, so it's left-wing. So now they're bursts. He claims a conspiracy. Why don't they just stick to the facts that are presented in the texts? Some of these texts are very disturbing, Goodlatte said, adding, they illustrate a conspiracy on the part of some people, and we want to know a lot more about that. That's where we are. There was a great summation in Investors Business Daily about all this, and I want to recommend that you take a look at it. It ties it up the way I've been tying it up here, the way I've tied it up on radio as well, and others are really seeing this for what it is too. So I hope you'll take a look at this a second time, play it back. I hope you'll share this episode with as many members of your family and friends and others as you possibly can. We're going to put it in front of the paywall, which means you don't even have to be a subscriber to see it. But we're counting on you Levinites, you patriots out there who are subscribers, who watch this program frequently, to take this program tonight and spread it. Spread it to your email list as far and wide as you possibly can, because you know what? The more people who have this information, the more likely we will get to the bottom of this. And we're going to need to get around to circumvent the big lib media. You saw them. We need to get around them in order to get the message out, because they're going to do their best to obstruct and cover up. And we're going to do our best to do the opposite. That's it.